Hey everybody, it's Dan Morey with Staffing Monthly, the industry's only digital publication that focuses on bringing you actionable insights in the areas of recruiting, marketing, sales, and leadership. And as we embark on the new year, I wanted to take a deeper dive into the area of healthcare staffing because there's been a major shift in this market recently, which is why I am reaching out to the experts like the gentleman that we're going to be speaking with today, talking about what's going on with healthcare organizations and what do staffing agencies need to be aware of to better meet their needs? And here with me today is actually Jeff Shapiro. He is currently the managing director and principal consultant at Lloyd Staffing. But this is a guy that's been in the industry for over 15 years, and he's really born and raised in healthcare in general. So he's actually one of the most well-versed people that you're going to get and has the perspective from both sides as it relates to the struggles of healthcare organizations and really what staffing agencies need to be doing to meet those needs. So Jeff, welcome to Staffing Monthly. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
So we were just having a really good conversation about the kind of the cultural sense of the new year bringing change and newness. And you mentioned that, hey, it never ceases to amaze me about how disorganized some organizations are. And I feel like sometimes we assume people have their act together and then they don't. And it's like, how do we actually deal with this? So I want to dig into that for our audience's sake. So I think healthcare is going through a major shift. I'm going to start there. Would you agree with that? And why do you think that is?
Definitely a major shift. I think the origin of how healthcare goes about their staffing and recruiting comes from this shift to being more customer centric. Your patient in reality is your customer. Years ago, people did not have a choice. They went to their doctor. They dealt with waiting in the waiting room for 3 hours, waiting 2 months to get an appointment. Now it is on demand. Who do I want to see? Where do I want to go? How are you going to treat me? Patient experience is at front and center of every healthcare organization right now because your patient is your customer and your customer has choices.
Really? So is it a sense right now where healthcare organizations are responding to kind of consumer behavior and they're trying to change the way they operate to capture more patients because it threatens like revenue? Is that like what's happening?
So a long, long, long time ago, when I was involved in healthcare operations, a very savvy SVP of operations told me if I could do my career all over again, I'd move into rev cycle. Follow the money. Just follow the money. So yes, patients are what drives revenue. Patient volume equals more revenue. Patient volume is your staffing model. How many patients are you seeing per day equals how many practitioners, providers, allied health, support staff, it all based on that, your customer, your patient, patient volume.
Wow. So isn't there a little bit of irony there that like the patients want on-demand service and the way they go about it, they're sort of forcing the hand of the organizations to kind of production line this. And then on the back end, the customer or the patients are like they're complaining about the level of service, like just being rushed through. Like there's some irony there, right?
So it's definitely a double-edged sword. But what I know from all of my years in healthcare is the patient experience will matter unless the patient absolutely loves their provider, their doctor. There is a very well-known ortho practice here, and it is just known if you have an appointment, you're going to be there for 3 hours. The staff are going to treat you as if you are a cog in the wheel, but all of the orthopods are the best. So you just deal with it. But on the opposite end, think about like the reinventing of urgent care, which is I spent a ton of time in unicorn urgent care, patient centric. What we're clocking everything, door to provider. How long does it take to check them in? Because that person made a choice to come there. And based on that experience, the next time they're sick, they may or may not come back. Because again, they don't want to wait 2 weeks to go see their primary care provider because I feel sick right now. I got to get in and out. So it's that tightrope that you have to walk, but it all comes down to the patient-doctor relationship. If a patient and doctor don't have that relationship, you're losing your patient, you're losing your revenue stream. In other words, bedside manner actually matters now.
Wow. So is it how well known is that throughout the organization? Like when I think about how complex a healthcare organization is, and there is patient care and delivering, services to patients, but then there is also rev cycle, and then there is obviously all the regulatory stuff that has to happen. Then there's staffing and like there's all these moving pieces, all these different departments. Like, does everybody know the importance of this and they're all trying to drive towards essentially profitability, or is there a disconnect inside the organization?
I I would guess there is a disconnect. I also think there's no 100% right answer. I think what market you're in, what's the size of the group, practice, or system. Do they have a sophisticated people operations team with centers of excellence that are out there? Are they using an HRBP model? Is it antiquated HR that's always saying no, no, no? Or are they the modern HR like, yes, you could do that, but, and you're kind of leading your operations teams to making their own decisions? There's just so much changing in the world of work, and it always starts in healthcare, because think about how much of our GDP it makes up. Healthcare is not going anywhere. It's at the front of tech. It's at the
Yeah.
front of life sciences. It's at the front of pharma. It's at the front of the customer experience, which is customer care. Healthcare revolves, touches every industry, really.
It really does. It definitely drives markets. So let's sort of shift this focus more towards the staffing side. So who really is leading the staffing decisions in a healthcare organization? Like who actually makes the final decision about the ability to work with staffing partners, how to bring on contingent contractor per diem staff? Like who's making those decisions?
Um, Depending on the organization, you have your different approval person. Typically, it's a CFO or a whatever the biz line is, the leader of that service line, because ultimately it's going to come out of their budget. So stereotypically, people think HR is the roadblock. HR is not your roadblock. HR wants the position filled as well. TA is not your roadblock. They want the position filled as well. Because again, if you don't have that seat filled, you're actually impacting revenue. Like, what is the cost of this seat being open? That's where getting very data centric is going to help any service line person on here's why I need to go to an agency, here's why we have an ROI on it. And instead of waiting for our in-house TA team tried, it's been 4 months, now we're going to go and really put some muscle behind it. You might want to think about like, what could I carve out away from TA and go to a competitor of 3 different contingency models? Or do I go RPO and take this chunk of the business away from the internal TA team that's burning out and just let somebody else focus on this? Because again, even if it's the call center, not being able to answer those phone calls means you're not able to schedule those appointments, which means you're also impacting your brand. So not only are you missing on appointments that day, but you're also having all of these patients who are customers say, I can't even get an appointment. I'm going somewhere else. So lost revenue is another thing a really data savvy person looks at. And the cost of this seat staying open is much more than you think. It's much more than that 20 to 25% placement fee.
So that, man, you just like, there's like three things I want to dig into there. So one, you talk about like having data ready. Sometimes as the agency or the expert, you kind of got to equip your department head with the data. And it sounds like you're really hitting on cost of vacancy, right? Like that's kind of the coup
It's a big
d'etat, the
one.
holy, yeah.
I
So
mean, I could also flip like what's the cost on your brand? You've had this position open for 4 months, 300 people have applied. Your internal team has maybe spoken to 50 of them. 250 people have heard nothing. The 50 you spoke to, what does your process look like? Are you standardized? Are they going through 2 interviews? Are they going through 6 interviews? All of
Mhm.
that is impacting your brand and what they're saying about you. And again, job seekers also have money. They're also customers. Their experience will impact if they want to do business
Oof.
with you. That's not isolated to healthcare either. If you have a
Yeah.
bad experience with a potential employer, the odds are you are not going to be a consumer of theirs.
So that's really interesting. So those are two key data points and kind of, I don't want to say arguments to make, but like definitely pieces to mention. You mentioned RPO, and I've definitely heard a lot more about that in healthcare over the last year. Do you feel like health organizations are starting to outsource some of the TA work to an RPO firm? And would it be wise for staffing agencies to maybe add that RPO line of business so they can actually kind of capture some of that and almost backfill it?
Yes, 100%. And I say that from the experience of leading TA teams in 2 very large healthcare organizations. It became you go to your CEO and say, hey, we are opening a brand new contact center in OKC. We need 100 call center agents. My team can do this. If they do that, I'm pulling away time and resources from the licensed providers who are treating your patients. So why don't we go take this off of their plate, give it to somebody else? RPO, just that entire chunk of business, gone, 6-month project. We'll hold them accountable. We'll have weekly meetings. They're an extension of the internal team. They are not a vendor, they are a partner. That's an important mindset to have. And then you're messaging to your internal TA team, hey guys, this is not a reflection on you. What do you think the CEO gets really excited about? When you hire 100 people to answer the phone, or when you hire 10 people to go see these patients and we could bill off of their license? Like, what's going to impact the business more? Not a reflection on you. I'm helping you out by taking this away. Don't worry. We all have egos. We're all feeling it's a poor reflection on you. I'm here to protect you. It's not you. We're making a business decision.
So I'm actually really glad that you actually preemptively covered that, because that was going to be my next question, is like, how do you really take a piece of TA's work away from them without making them feel kind of hurt by that? And then, because you need them as an ally, you need them on your side. If they're not your roadblock, and HR is not your roadblock, how do you make them your ally? And it sounds like you covered that from the TA side, but how do you get HR in your camp? Like, how do you get them to not just not be a roadblock, but be a champion for you and support bringing you in to help that department head, better manage their service delivery?
That's the hardest part, and it really depends on the
That's why I asked
HR.
the hard questions,
It's
Jeff.
it's it's definitely the hardest part. It depends on like what is their HR team? What is the DNA of the HR team? Are they very modernized, open source, or are they what I always call legacy HR, like the gatekeeper roadblock?
Mm.
So you have different paths and how you're going to do that. But typically, the better buy-in for you is from your service line leader, because again, it's not going to come out of the HR budget. It's going to come out of whatever department you're working with. It's coming out of their budget. HR wants the bodies in seats. They'll most likely say, okay, we'll be part of the interview team. And this way we know the hiring teams are not making the wrong decisions, because we don't have our internal recruiters who really eat, sleep, and breathe and know what the culture is here. Well, who is going to carry out our mission, vision, and values? So they're not involved. We're going to insert ourselves. So a great pitch would be, hey, HR, I would actually like you to be part of the interview process. You could be the one who assures you have cultural alignment. The operations team will make sure this person has the knowledge, skills, and ability to do the job, but you'll make sure they're going to deliver that quality of care that this organization believes in.
So I like that. So really, from the staffing agency side, focusing on the ultimate goal for the organization is about maximizing patient care, because patient care leads to more revenue, better brand, again, the flywheel of getting more patients because of the better brand, and there's more money, then they can reinvest in more services. Like, it really does come down to, like, the having the service providers to provide good care. And if that's the center of it, then really the cost of vacancy and the impact of vacancy on the brand and everything else really are the two data points to support why it's so important. And then if you're a staffing agency, it sounds like you really need to focus on speed and access. How quickly can you get access to qualified people and be pipelining talent? And then maybe you set your benchmarks up to measure against your fill percentage. How often are you filling the role that the organization is giving to you? And how often is that role stay filled and maybe not have to refill it or create new vacancies? Am I digging in the right place there?
You are only I will, the soapbox I will get on is, does the order, does the seat stay filled, is never on the recruiter. That's the one thing that will burn out almost every recruiter, internal and external, filling the same job for the same hiring manager 6 times in a year, and no one's doing anything about that hiring manager. So like the
But how do
real
you do that?
savvy,
Let's get down and dirty,
yeah,
Jeff.
so
Like,
I will give you
how
the
do you
trick.
raise that question?
The real savvy recruiters, what is your hiring manager batting average? That is how you find out where the problem is. 4 different hiring managers all hired 50 people within the same 6-month time period. One of them has attrition skyrocketing compared to the others. The problem is that hiring manager.
Okay.
Clearly, you have it right there. So like quality of hire and length of tenure, like all of that is not a recruiting stat. Like people leave bad leaders. That's not on the recruiter. The recruiter's not there day in and day out. The recruiter's not doing the weekly one-on-one. The recruiter's not supporting the growth or like how this person's going to climb their career ladder at that organization. It's on the manager. So like attrition is not a recruiting stat ever.
So I love that you said that. I see eye to eye with you on that. Do you paint that picture like in a QBR when you're like, hey, we just want to show you all the areas that we fill for, and then here are the performance stats across each department. So when they see the glaring data within like underneath one hiring manager, like then you present sort of a diplomatic call out to that. Is that like the best way to kind of?
So we're opening a door that typically like the world that you and I are in now, like the third party partner vendor, we don't have access to any of this data, but it was my number one go-to when you're internal, you're a TA leader and you need to defend your team. Like right away, I am armed with data of this is not on recruiter X. This is on this manager. Look how many people they've hired for this seat in this amount of time. What's being done with that manager? What are we doing with the L&D team to give them leadership training? Like something has to change because
Is,
my recruiter is going to leave if I
is
keep asking them to fill the same job over and over.
is there a time when you might go to HR, the department head, whoever, and say, we'll fill orders in all of these areas, but we will not fill orders from this hiring manager. Like we just can't work in this area because like we're just spinning our wheels and like it's clearly an outlier for this one area. So is there a time that you just walk away from that piece of the business and jeopardize the overall relationship? Like how do you navigate the
So
politics of that?
here's the fun part of being outside now versus inside. Inside, it's a partnership. I don't have a choice. I have to work with that manager. That manager has to work with my recruiter. Can I reallocate resources? Sure. I could pull off Joe and assign it to Erin. That hiring manager, nothing's going to change. On our side now, I have the ability to fire a client. Hey, I'm just not willing to work with that person anymore. And that's a tough thing to do. Like we all don't want to walk away from a possible placement, from a possible fee agreement.
Yeah.
But are you really going to collect that fee agreement if this is like the third time you're doing this replacement and they still haven't filled the invoice? Or, so at some point, like firing a client is very powerful.
I agree. I think that honestly life is too short and there is enough business out there that you really should only do business with the people that you like working with, you
Yeah.
know.
Yep.
I mean, it's I agree with you there. Hey, I know our time is coming to a close. I really just want to give you a platform. If you were talking to staffing leaders, right? Like executive, like C-suite owners of healthcare staffing companies, and you were going to say, hey, this is the one thing that I would advise you to focus on this year to really excel and grow in the healthcare staffing space, what would that piece of advice be?
Listening tour. Go on a listening tour. I've always called it mind the business. Stop telling people how you're going to fix all of their problems and actually learn what their problems are, and then figure out how you could offer a solution or point them in the right direction. So my number one pet peeve when I was corporate was when I'd get the call, the email of, hey, we could fix your biggest problem at 35% of a cost reduction. Great. You don't know how I triage my problems. The product that you're sending to me is like 10th on my list of what I'm worried about. Not at all. Like, but if the person took the time to say, hey, network with intention. Would love to get to know you, learn about the business, share some things I'm doing with some other players in this market. Let's see, like, let's just talk about market intel and go on that listening tour and start learning about what people's problems are. And then what is your creative solution? The supply and demand is a big one. Yes, everybody knows nobody wants to be a doctor anymore. Like at one point, I was working with an organization that was thinking about opening, buying, and becoming accredited to create their own school to produce the type of talent that they would hire and then get into the high schools, go to the STEM programs, offer scholarships. It never went anywhere because it's really hard and
That,
really expensive to
that's a
open a
heavy
brand new
lift.
school. But like what could you do to start solving these problems? And no idea is bad. When you throw 15 ideas at somebody and they reject 14 of them, you still have one new thing that they could try. So listening tour, mind the business, learn what their problems are, start talking to others, see what their problems are, how did they attack it, and then you come up with solutions that you could really talk with your clients about. That is the best piece of advice I can give you.
I love that, man. And that is a great spot to land this plane. Hey, if anyone out there wants to talk to you and like pick your brain more about kind of your expertise in the healthcare world or really what you do at Lloyd Staffing, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
I mean, honestly, it's as easy as just Google my name and recruiter. You'll find me. I'm
I
super
don't know. There's a
active
lot of Jeff
on
Shapiros out there.
there are. I'm super active on X, Twitter, LinkedIn. Like you'll find me if you really want to. I believe in open networking, so if you want time, I'm happy to chat. Um, whether it's a 15-minute meet and greet or a deep dive conversation, happy to do it.
I love it, man. Hey, I appreciate you being on Staffing Monthly and just sharing your knowledge from the other side with us in the staffing world.
Yeah, it's been fun, Dan. Thank you.